The rooftop of Prestige Logistics was trying to kill Jackson Cole. 106 degrees. That's what the weatherman said this morning on WFAA. But the weatherman wasn't standing on black tar paper in July. The weatherman wasn't breathing air that felt like it came straight from a crematorium. Up here on the flat commercial roof of this 3-story office building off Stemmons Freeway, the temperature had to be pushing 120, maybe more. Jackson wiped the sweat from his eyes with the back of his forearm. His gray work shirt was soaked through, clinging to his chest like a second skin. Salt stains bloomed under his arms and down his spine. His steel-toed red wings were softening at the soles, not melting exactly, but close. He'd been up here for 4 hours now, wrestling with a Carrier 50XC rooftop unit that had given up the ghost sometime around dawn. The compressor was shot. Bearings were grinding like a garbage disposal full of marbles, typical summer failure. These units weren't built for Texas heat. Nothing was. He crouched beside the open panel, hands black with refrigerant oil, and reached for his gauges. The metal burned his palm. He didn't flinch. 34 years old, 14 of them spent in commercial HVAC, and his hands had stopped registering pain somewhere around year 5. Calluses on calluses, scar tissue on scar tissue. His radio crackled. "Jackson, you almost done up there." "Front desk says the suits are complaining about the temperature." That was Ruddy, his dispatcher. Good guy, former Marine. Missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a table saw accident, which meant he couldn't do fieldwork anymore. Now he sat in a truck all day, eating breakfast tacos and sending Jackson to hellholes like this one. Jackson keyed the radio. "Tell the suits to drink some water." "Compressor's cooked. I'm bypassing to the backup unit, but it's gonna take another hour." "Copy that. Hey, you eat lunch?" "Not hungry." "It's 2 o'clock, brother." "I said I'm not hungry." Jackson clipped the radio back to his belt. He wasn't hungry. He was tired and broke and running on black coffee and spite. He stood up, stretching his back, and that's when he saw the skylight. It was 10 feet to his left. A big industrial thing, maybe 4 feet square, slightly tinted but not enough to hide what was underneath. Jackson had walked past it a dozen times today, hadn't looked down once. But now, wiping the sweat from his face, he glanced at it and froze. The skylight looked directly into the corner office on the 3rd floor, the nicest office in the building. Big mahogany desk, leather chairs, a view of the Dallas skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, and in that office, in that blessed, air-conditioned sanctuary that Jackson's labor was currently trying to restore, sat 2 people. One of them was Garrett Whitmore, regional manager of Prestige Logistics, 45 years old, silver hair swept back like a televangelist. Blue suit that probably cost more than Jackson's truck payment. He was leaning back in his chair, hands behind his head, laughing at something. The other person was Jenna, Jackson's wife. She was sitting on the edge of Garrett's desk, not in a chair, on the desk. Her legs were crossed. She was wearing that red blouse Jackson had bought her for their anniversary 2 years ago. The one she said was too flashy for church. The one she said made her feel like she was trying too hard. She didn't look like she was trying too hard now. She was laughing too, throwing her head back, touching Garrett's arm when she talked. That little gesture she used to do with Jackson back when she still touched him at all. Jackson watched for maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30. Time didn't work right up here in the heat. His brain was cooking just like the compressor. He watched Garrett lean forward, say something close to Jenna's ear. He watched Jenna smile, that real smile. The one Jackson hadn't seen in months. Then he looked away. He went back to the unit. He finished the bypass. He packed up his tools. His hands didn't shake. His face didn't change. That's who Jackson was. That's who he'd always been. The guy who fixed things while other people broke them. 45 minutes later, Jackson was inside the building. The lobby was like walking into a meat locker. 68 degrees, maybe 65. The sweat on his shirt went cold instantly, and he felt his skin prickle with goosebumps. His boots left muddy prints on the polished marble floor. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a name tag that said Destiny, looked at him like he was a stray dog that had wandered in off the highway. "Service entrance is around back," she said. "I know, I need a signature on the work order." "From who?" "Whoever signs for maintenance, building manager, office manager." He paused. "Regional manager." Destiny picked up the phone. She whispered something into it, then hung up. "Mr. Whitmore will see you, 3rd floor." Jackson already knew where the third floor was. He'd been looking at it for 4 hours. The elevator was glass-walled, all chrome and mirrors. Jackson caught his reflection and didn't recognize himself, face red and swollen from sun exposure. Hair plastered to his forehead, oil stains on his neck, his arms, his jeans. He looked like he'd been dragged behind a truck. He looked like exactly what he was. A working man in a world that didn't want to see him. The doors opened. The third floor was all open cubicles and glass offices, humming with the gentle white noise of computers and phone calls and the sweet, sweet sound of functioning air conditioning. Heads turned as Jackson walked past. A few people wrinkled their noses. One guy in a pink polo shirt actually covered his mouth. Jackson kept walking. Garrett's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Garrett was still in his chair, but he'd turned to face the entrance. And Jenna was still there too, standing now, her arms crossed, her face suddenly very interested in the window. "There he is," Garrett said, spreading his arms wide. "The man of the hour, our savior from the sweat. Come in, come in." Jackson stepped inside. The office smelled like cologne. Sandalwood and something sharper underneath. Money, maybe, or the illusion of it. "Just need a signature," Jackson said. He held out the clipboard. Garrett didn't take it. Instead, he leaned back and made a show of sniffing the air. His nose wrinkled, his lip curled. He looked at Jenna. "Smells like hard work, right, Jenna?" It was a joke. Obviously a joke. The kind of joke that wasn't really a joke. The kind of joke that was actually a knife wrapped in a smile. Jackson waited for Jenna to say something. Anything. Waited for her to roll her eyes at Garrett or give Jackson that little apologetic look or even just meet his gaze for 1 second. She didn't. She kept her eyes on the window, her jaw tightened. Her arms stayed crossed. She reached out, took the clipboard from Jackson's hand without looking at him, signed the work order and handed it back. "Thanks," she said, to the window, to the skyline, to anyone but him. Garrett chuckled. "You're all set, Chief. Destiny will validate your parking." He waved a hand toward the door. Dismissal, royalty to peasant. Jackson took the clipboard. He walked out. He didn't look back. The gas station was on Harry Hinn's, about 2 miles from the job site. Jackson pulled his 2004 F-150 up to pump number 7 and killed the engine. The truck was 180,000 miles old, primer gray where the paint had given up, and the AC had stopped working 2 summers ago. Jackson had the parts to fix it in a box under his bed. He just couldn't afford the refrigerant. He swiped his debit card at the pump. The screen flickered. Card declined. He swiped it again. Card declined. Jackson stared at the screen, then he pulled out his phone and opened the banking app. It took 30 seconds to load because his phone was 3 generations old and the screen was cracked in the corner. The balance appeared. Checking. Negative. $247 in the red. Jackson scrolled through the recent transactions. Gas, $14. Groceries, $32. Electric bill, auto pay, $89. And then right there in the middle, the thing that didn't belong. NORDSDROM rack, $412. SEPHORA, $87.50. MACYS, $156. Jenna had done this. 3 days ago, while Jackson was pulling 12-hour shifts trying to keep them afloat, Jenna had gone shopping. New clothes, new makeup. $655 they didn't have. He remembered the conversation now. Last week. Jenna standing in the bedroom, complaining about having nothing to wear. Garrett's company was hosting some kind of retreat. A business conference at the Gaylord Texan in Grapevine. Jenna said she needed to look professional. "It's a networking opportunity," she'd said. "Garrett said I could come as his +1. It's for my career, Jackson." His +1. Jackson put the phone away. He went inside and paid for $10 of gas with the crumpled bills in his wallet. The clerk, a heavyset guy with a cowboy's tattoo on his forearm, looked at him with something like pity. "Rough day?" Something like that. The apartment was on Gaston Avenue in a building that had been luxury sometime around 1987. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. They'd lived here for 3 years now, ever since they got married. Ever since Jenna said she wanted to build something together. Jackson parked in the lot and sat in his truck for a long time. He didn't want to go inside. He knew what was waiting for him, the same thing that was always waiting for him. The questions, the complaints, the heavy sighs and rolled eyes and that special tone Jenna used when she talked about their situation. But he couldn't sit in the truck forever, so he got out. He walked up the stairs. He opened the door. The heat hit him like a wall, 90 degrees, maybe more. The apartment had no central air, just a window unit in the bedroom that Jackson had sold for parts 2 months ago. The fans were running, but all they did was push the hot air around. Jenna was on the couch. She was still wearing the red blouse, but she'd kicked off her heels. Her face was flushed. Her hair was limp. A half-empty glass of white wine sat on the coffee table next to her phone. "Finally," she said. "Did you bring dinner?" "No." "Why not?" "Card got declined." Jenna stared at him. "What do you mean declined?" "I mean there's no money in the account. I mean we're $250 in the hole. I mean somebody spent $600 at the mall while I was working." The words came out flat. No anger, no accusation, just facts. Jenna's face shifted. First confusion, then recognition, then something else. Something that looked a lot like defiance. "That was for the retreat. I told you about the retreat." The retreat was supposed to be free. The retreat was free. The clothes weren't. She stood up, fanning herself with her hand. "God, it's like an oven in here. Why can't you fix the AC?" "Because I sold the AC." "Then buy a new one? With what money, Jenna?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. The wine was hitting her now. Jackson could see it in her eyes, the way they went glassy and mean. "Figure it out. That's what you do, right? You fix things, so fix this." Jackson didn't answer. He went to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and drank half of it standing there in the kitchen. The silence stretched between them like a rubber band. Jenna followed him. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him. "Garrett's life is effortless, you know that?" Jackson kept drinking. "He has a car that works. He has an apartment with air conditioning. He has a 401k and stock options and a future." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everything with you is a struggle, Jackson, every single day, every single month. It's always something. The truck breaks down, the card gets declined, the bills pile up. I'm so tired of struggling." Jackson finished the water. He set the bottle on the counter. He turned to face her. "I'm doing the best I can." "Your best isn't good enough." The words hung in the air, heavy, final, like a door slamming shut. Jackson stepped toward her. He reached out slowly and put his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort, a gesture of connection. The kind of thing a husband does when his wife is hurting. Jenna flinched. Not just pulled away. Flinched, like his touch was something dirty, like his hand was covered in oil and sweat and poverty, like he was a disease she didn't want to catch. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The flinch said everything. Jackson let his hand drop. He stood there for a long moment looking at this woman he'd married. This woman he'd loved. This woman who was looking at him now like he was a stranger. No, worse than a stranger, a burden. "I'm gonna take a shower," he said. He walked past her down the hall into the bathroom. He closed the door. He turned on the water, and then only then, in the steam and the noise and the privacy, did Jackson Cole let himself feel anything at all. 3 weeks later, Jackson stood in front of the bathroom mirror trying to remember how to tie a Windsor knot. His father had shown him once years ago, before the old man's hands got too shaky from the Parkinson's. Loop, wrap, pull through, tighten. Simple enough. But Jackson's fingers weren't cooperating. His hands were made for wrenches and wire strippers, not silk and ceremony. The suit was from Goodwill. Charcoal gray, single-breasted, slightly too big in the shoulders. He'd found it on the clearance rack for $18. The shirt was white, freshly pressed, borrowed from his buddy Marcus who worked security at the Galleria. The tie was the only nice thing he owned. A deep burgundy silk number that Jenna had given him for Christmas 2 years ago, back when she still gave him things. "Jackson?" Jenna's voice came from the bedroom, impatient, sharp, almost ready. "The car's coming in 10 minutes. I'm not going to be late because you can't dress yourself." Jackson finished the knot. It was crooked. He didn't care. He walked into the bedroom. Jenna was standing in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the straps of a black cocktail dress he'd never seen before. It was tight in all the right places, cut low in the front, probably cost more than his truck payment. "New dress?" "Borrowed it from Cassidy at work." Jenna didn't look at him. "How do I look?" "Beautiful." She finally turned. Her eyes moved over him head to toe, and her expression said everything her mouth didn't. Disappointment, resignation, the look you give a stray dog that followed you home. "The suit's too big. It's what I have. And those shoes, are those work boots?" Jackson looked down. He was wearing his brown-red wings, the dress ones, not the steel toes. He'd polished them this morning. "They're the only dress shoes I own." Jenna sighed. That sigh, the one that said, "This is my life now. Just try not to embarrass me, okay? And don't talk about work. These are Garrett's clients, his colleagues. They don't want to hear about toilets and vents. I fix air conditioners, Jenna, not toilets. Same difference." She grabbed her clutch from the bed. "Just smile and nod. That's all you have to do? Smile and nod." The Prestige Logistics annual gala was held at the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas. Jackson had driven past this building 100 times. It was a massive Baroque revival thing on Commerce Street, all carved stone and arched windows, built back when Texas oil money was new and people wanted everyone to know they had it. Inside, the lobby was all marble floors and crystal chandeliers and men in tuxedos who looked at Jackson's Goodwill suit like he'd wandered in off the street. Which, in a way, he had. The ballroom was on the 19th floor. 200 people, easy. White tablecloths, silver candlesticks. A live jazz band playing Coltrane in the corner. Waiters in black vests circulating with trays of champagne and those tiny appetizers that cost $5 a bite. Jenna disappeared into the crowd almost immediately. "I need to network," she said, squeezing his arm once perfunctorily before vanishing toward a group of women in designer dresses. Jackson stood by the bar. He ordered a Shiner Bock. The bartender looked at him like he'd asked for a glass of motor oil. "We have Stella Artois, Heineken, Peroni. Shiner. Sir, we don't carry. Whiskey, then. Neat." The bartender poured. Jackson drank. The burn felt good, familiar. He watched the room, watched the way people moved, the handshakes and air kisses and fake laughs, everyone performing, everyone pretending. It was like watching a nature documentary about some exotic species he'd never understand. And then Garrett Whitmore appeared. He came out of nowhere, slipping through the crowd like a shark through shallow water. Gray suit, perfectly tailored. Pocket square lavender, hair swept back, gleaming under the chandeliers. He was holding a martini in one hand and a woman's elbow in the other. The woman was young, blonde, and definitely not his wife. "Jackson, my man." Garrett released the blonde and spread his arms wide. "Didn't expect to see you here. Jenna said you might not make it." Jenna was wrong. "Well, well." Garrett clapped him on the shoulder, too hard, the way men do when they want you to know they could hit you if they chose to. "Don't you clean up nice, is that suit?" "Vintage, something like that?" Garrett laughed. The blonde laughed. Somewhere across the room, a waiter dropped a tray and everyone pretended not to notice. "Come on," Garrett said, steering Jackson toward a corner booth. "Let me tell you about some opportunities. You're a smart guy. Blue-collar smart, but smart. You should be thinking about your future." Jackson let himself be steered. He didn't have anything better to do. The booth was occupied by 3 other men, all suits, all expensive watches, all talking over each other about stock prices and market trends and things Jackson didn't understand or care about. "Gentlemen," Garrett announced, sliding into the booth, "this is Jackson. He's in. Infrastructure. Infrastructure." One of the men, a bald guy with a Boston accent, raised an eyebrow. "Commercial development?" "HVAC," Jackson said. Silence. "He fixes our air conditioning," Garrett clarified. More silence. Then the bald guy laughed like Jackson had told a joke and went back to talking about emerging markets. Garrett ordered another round of drinks. He started talking about his portfolio. His diversification strategy. His stock options that were going to vest next quarter and turn him into a millionaire. The other men nodded along. They'd heard this speech before. They were giving versions of it themselves. Jackson wasn't listening. He was watching Garrett's wrist. Garrett wore his watch loose, the way men do when they want you to notice it. It was a Patek Philippe. Or at least it was supposed to be. Cream dial, Roman numerals, leather strap. The kind of watch that cost more than most people's houses. But something was wrong. Jackson had been a mechanic his whole life. Cars first, then refrigeration, then HVAC. He understood how things worked. Gears, mechanisms, precision. And he knew from reading magazines in waiting rooms and watching YouTube videos during lunch breaks that a real Patek Philippe had a sweeping second hand. The movement was automatic, powered by the motion of the wearer's wrist, and the second hand glided smoothly around the dial in one continuous motion. Garrett's watch didn't sweep. It ticked, 1 second at a time. Tick, tick, tick. Like a Timex, like a $20 drugstore watch with a quartz movement and a battery. Garrett's Patek Philippe was fake. Jackson didn't react, didn't smile, didn't say a word. He just filed the information away somewhere deep where it could sit and ferment until he figured out what to do with it. The conversation continued. Garrett kept bragging, the other men kept nodding. Jackson kept watching, and the fake watch kept ticking. An hour later, Jackson needed air. The ballroom was suffocating, too many people, too much cologne, too many lies dressed up in expensive suits. He excused himself from a conversation about golf handicaps and wandered toward the exit. The hallway outside was quieter. Persian rugs, brass wall sconces. The kind of old money elegance that made you feel poor just by looking at it. Jackson loosened his tie and walked toward the elevators. That's when he heard Garrett's voice. "Need more time. I understand the terms, but the market is volatile right now. You can't expect me to." Jackson stopped. Garrett was standing around the corner near a service alcove, his back to the hallway. He had his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, urgent, desperate. 60 days, that's all I'm asking. 60 days and I'll have the money, the lease payment, the maintenance fees, all of it. I just need. Silence. Garrett's shoulders sagged. No, I understand. I'll figure something out." He hung up. He stood there for a moment, staring at the wall. Then he straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and turned toward the ballroom. Jackson pressed himself against the wall. Garrett walked right past him without seeing. His face was pale. His jaw was tight. He looked like a man who'd just been told his house was on fire. Jackson waited until the footsteps faded. Then he let out a breath. The BMW. Garrett's precious 7 Series, the one he parked in the executive spot every morning, the one he bragged about to anyone who would listen. It wasn't bought, it was leased. And Garrett couldn't make the payments. The rich boss was broke. Jackson found Jenna near the dance floor. She was talking to a group of women, laughing at something, holding a glass of champagne like it was a prop. When she saw Jackson approaching, her smile flickered. "There you are. Where have you been?" "Getting some air." "Well, come dance with me. The band is playing Sinatra." She grabbed his hand. Her fingers were cold from the champagne glass. They walked to the dance floor and assumed the position. His hand on her waist, her hand on his shoulder. Bodies close but not touching. Two people pretending to be intimate. "Are you having a good time?" she asked. "Not really." "You could try for me." Jackson didn't answer. They swayed to the music, Frank Sinatra singing about the way you wear your hat. "Garrett says you were talking to Scott Porter, the one from the investment firm." "I was listening, not talking." "Same thing. It's good to make connections, Jackson." "These are important people." "They're not my people." Jenna's grip tightened on his shoulder, not affection, frustration. "They could be if you tried, if you dressed better and talked about something other than compressors and refrigerant lines, if you acted like you belonged here." "I don't belong here, Jenna. That's the problem." She pulled back just slightly and looked at him. "That's always been the problem. You don't want more, you don't dream bigger, you just accept things, accept being broke, accept being nobody." "I'm not nobody. To these people you are." The song ended. The band started something new. Jenna dropped her hands. "I need to freshen up. Stay here." She walked away. Jackson watched her go. Then he walked to the bar and ordered another whiskey. At 11 o'clock, Garrett found him again. "Hey, buddy, great party, right? Hey, listen, we've got some clients coming up through the front entrance. Big fish. Japanese investors, very formal, very proper." Jackson set down his drink. "Okay." "Yeah, so." Garrett put his hand on Jackson's shoulder, the same too-hard grip. "It might be better if you use the service elevator. Just for the next hour or so, you understand." Jackson looked at him, really looked, saw the fake watch, the desperate eyes, the smile that didn't reach anywhere. "Sure, Garrett, I understand." "Great, great." Garrett patted his shoulder. "You're a team player, Jackson. That's what I like about you." He walked away. Jackson finished his whiskey, then he went to find Jenna. She was standing near the entrance talking to Garrett. Their heads were close together. Garrett was whispering something in her ear. Jenna was smiling, that real smile. Jackson walked toward them. "I'm leaving." Jenna's smile vanished. "What now? Now you coming?" She glanced at Garrett. Garrett shrugged, a tiny shrug, permission granted. "I'll stay a little longer, catch an Uber home." She didn't look at Jackson when she said it. "Don't wait up." The drive home took 37 minutes. Jackson didn't play the radio, didn't think about the traffic, didn't think about anything except that watch, that phone call, that shrug. The marriage was over. He'd known it for a while, probably. Felt it creeping up like a slow leak in a compressor line. You don't notice at first. The pressure drops a little, the efficiency suffers a little, but everything still works. Until one day it doesn't. Until one day the whole system fails and you're standing there wondering how you missed all the warning signs. Jackson didn't cry. He wasn't built for crying. His father hadn't cried at his mother's funeral. His grandfather hadn't cried when he lost the farm the first time. Coleman didn't cry. They calculated. They planned. They figured out what came next. He pulled into the apartment parking lot at midnight. He walked up the stairs. He opened the door to that stifling, suffocating apartment and stood in the darkness for a long moment. Then he went to the closet. His tools were in the back, 3 red metal toolboxes stacked on top of each other. A 20-pound bag of fittings, a manifold gauge set, a vacuum pump, a recovery machine. 15 years of work condensed into equipment that fit in the bed of a pickup truck. These were his, not hers, not theirs. His. Jackson started packing. 3 weeks later, Jackson lay awake at 2:47 a.m. The bedroom was dark. The apartment was silent. Jenna was supposed to be home by 11. Some work dinner. Some client meeting, some excuse he'd stopped believing weeks ago. He stared at the ceiling. He thought about the cracks in the plaster. He thought about how long it would take to fix them. He thought about nothing at all. At 3:14, he heard the key in the lock. The front door opened. Closed, footsteps in the hallway, quiet footsteps, the kind you use when you don't want to wake someone up. When you don't want to explain where you've been, Jackson didn't move. He kept his breathing steady, eyes closed, playing dead. The bedroom door opened, a sliver of light from the hallway, Jenna's silhouette. She stood there for a moment watching him, then she slipped inside, closed the door, and crept toward the bathroom. The bathroom light clicked on, water running. Jackson opened his eyes. The smell hit him before anything else. Sandalwood, sharp and expensive. The same cologne that had filled Garrett's office 3 weeks ago. It was coming through the crack under the bathroom door, mixing with something else. Gin, expensive gin. The kind they served at hotel bars. Jackson sat up in bed. He didn't say anything. He just waited. Jenna came out 10 minutes later. She was wearing her robe now, her makeup scrubbed off, her hair wrapped in a towel. She saw him sitting there and stopped. "You're awake." "Couldn't sleep. I tried not to wake you." "I know." She walked to the dresser, started pulling out pajamas. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like she was trying very hard to seem normal. "How was the dinner?" "Fine." "Where'd you go?" "That new place on McKinney, the one with the small plates." She pulled a t-shirt over her head. "You would have hated it." "Probably." She climbed into bed, pulled the covers up, turned away from him. Jackson waited 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. "I can smell him on you, Jenna." She didn't move, didn't breathe. The silence stretched out like a wire pulled tight. "What?" "Garrett." "His cologne, it's all over you." Another silence, longer this time. "We had drinks after the dinner. He was there. It was a group thing." "Drinks don't get on your neck, Jenna." She turned over, slowly, like she was moving through water. Her eyes met his in the darkness. "What are you accusing me of?" "Nothing. I'm telling you what I smell." "Jackson, it's done, isn't it?" She didn't answer. But the answer was there in the space between them, in the way she wouldn't meet his eyes, in the way she pulled the covers tighter like they could protect her from what was coming. "Just say it, Jenna." "I don't." "Say it," she exhaled, a long, shaky breath, and then finally the truth. "I'm leaving, Jackson. Garrett and I have been. It's complicated, but yes, I'm leaving." Jackson nodded. He'd known, of course he'd known, but hearing it out loud in the darkness of their bedroom was different. It made it real. "When?" "Tomorrow. He's sending a truck to pick up my things." "A truck? He's helping me move." "To where? His place?" Jenna sat up. Her jaw was set now. The guilt was fading, replaced by something harder, defiance. "Yes, to his place, to his life." "He has a future, Jackson. He has plans. He's going places." "He's broke, Jenna." "What?" "Garrett, he's broke. The car is leased. The watch is fake. He called a bank begging for an extension on his payments. I heard him at the gala." Jenna stared at him, then she laughed, a small, bitter laugh. "You're pathetic, you know that. You can't stand that he has more than you, so you make up stories. You invent reasons to tear him down." "I'm not inventing anything." "You fix things broken by winners, Jackson. That's all you are. That's all you've ever been." She was out of bed now, pacing, her voice rising. "He builds companies. He makes deals. He changes the world. And you crawl around on rooftops in the heat, fixing his air conditioning so he can stay comfortable while he does it." "Jenna, no, I'm done. I'm done with this apartment. I'm done with this life. I'm done pretending that this is enough." She stopped by the window. The streetlight made her face glow orange. "He's a winner, you're a fixer. That's the difference. That's why I'm leaving." Jackson didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The truck arrived at noon. It wasn't a moving truck. It was a rental. A Penske box truck, the kind you get from U-Haul for $40 a day. Garrett climbed out of the driver's seat wearing jeans and a polo shirt, trying to look humble, trying to look like a regular guy. Jackson was sitting on the front steps, watching. "Hey, buddy." Garrett walked up with his hands in his pockets, that same smirk, that same fake confidence. "No hard feelings, right? Things happen, people grow apart. People grow apart. Exactly, it's nobody's fault, it's just life." He looked at the apartment building. "You need help moving her stuff, or?" "No, cool, cool." He rocked on his heels. "I'll take it from here then, take care of her." Jackson stood up. He was taller than Garrett, broader. Hands that could crush a man's windpipe if he wanted them to, but he didn't want them to. He just wanted this to be over. "You think you're taking her somewhere better," Jackson said. "You think you're saving her from me, but you're not." "Jackson, listen. You're drowning, Garrett, I can see it. The debt, the lies, the fake watch, and the leased car, and the company that's bleeding money. You're treading water, and when you go under, you're gonna take her with you." Garrett's smirk faltered, just for a second, just long enough for Jackson to see the fear underneath. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not." Jackson stepped aside. "But she chose you, so I hope for her sake I'm wrong." Jenna came out of the building with a box in her arms. She walked past Jackson without looking at him. Garrett took the box and loaded it into the truck. They made 6 trips, clothes, books, the good dishes, the framed photos from their wedding, though Jackson noticed she left the one of them at Big Bend. The one where they looked happy. Finally, it was done. The truck was loaded. Garrett climbed into the driver's seat. Jenna stood on the curb, her purse over her shoulder, her sunglasses hiding her eyes. "Goodbye, Jackson. Goodbye, Jenna." She turned and walked toward the truck. Then she stopped, turned back. "I hope you find someone who deserves you." Jackson didn't answer. He just watched her climb into the passenger seat, watched Garrett start the engine, watched the truck pull away from the curb and disappear down Gaston Avenue. Then he went back inside. The apartment was empty, not completely empty. The furniture was still there. The couch, the TV, the kitchen table with the wobbly leg. She'd taken her half, and this was what remained. Jackson's half. The parts nobody wanted. He stood in the living room and looked around. The walls were bare where her photos used to hang. The bookshelf was half empty. The closet in the bedroom was a ghost town of wire hangers. Something moved in the corner. Jackson turned. It was Biscuit, Jenna's dog. Well, their dog. A 12-year-old beagle mix with a gray muzzle and arthritic hips. He was sitting by the door, staring at the spot where Jenna had disappeared. She'd left the dog. "Hey, buddy." Jackson knelt down. Biscuit looked at him with cloudy eyes. "Guess it's just you and me now." Biscuit didn't respond. He just kept staring at the door. Jackson spent the rest of the day doing nothing. He sat on the couch. He drank water from the tap because the filter was one of the things Jenna had taken. He watched the shadows move across the wall as the sun set. At some point, he dragged the camping chair from the closet. The couch was too soft, too full of memories. The camping chair was just aluminum and nylon, neutral. Nobody had sat in it but him. He set it up in the middle of the living room and sat down. Biscuit curled up at his feet. This was his life now, an empty apartment, a dying dog, a camping chair. The letter arrived 3 days later. Jackson almost missed it. He'd been sleeping in his truck the past 2 nights, parked in the lot behind the apartment building, trying to save on electricity. The Texas summer wasn't over yet, and running the AC, if he'd had AC, would have cost money he didn't have. He came inside to shower and check the mail. There were 3 items in the box: a credit card offer, a pizza coupon, and a certified letter from something called Hargrove and Associates, attorneys at law out of Karnes City, Texas. Jackson didn't know anyone in Karnes City. He'd barely heard of Karnes City. It was a dot on the map somewhere south of San Antonio. Ranch country, oil country, nothing. He almost threw the letter away. Almost tossed it in the trash with the pizza coupon and went back to his truck. But something made him stop, something about the weight of the envelope, the official look of it. He opened it. "Dear Mr. Cole, this letter is to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the estate of Harold J. Cole, deceased. Mr. Cole passed away on April 14, 2011, and as per his last will and testament, all property and mineral rights associated with the H.J. Cole Family Trust have been transferred to you. The property in question consists of 640 acres of unimproved land in Karnes County, Texas, legally described as..." Jackson stopped reading. His grandfather, Harold Jackson Cole, The man who taught him how to fish, how to fix an engine, how to keep your mouth shut when everyone else was running theirs. He died 4 months ago, and nobody had told Jackson. He kept reading. We have been contacted by representatives of Maverick Energy Partners, LLC, regarding the potential lease of mineral rights on the aforementioned property. The Eagle Ford Shale Formation, which extends beneath your grandfather's land, has recently become a site of significant interest for oil and gas extraction. We strongly advise you to contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss your options. Jackson read the letter 3 times, then he read it again. Mineral rights, oil and gas, Eagle Ford Shale. He didn't know what any of it meant, but he knew one thing: his grandfather's useless dirt farm might not be so useless after all. The next 2 weeks were the darkest of Jackson's life. He didn't call the lawyers, he didn't open the mail, he didn't do much of anything except work and sleep and try not to think. The letter sat on his kitchen counter, unopened since that first reading, collecting dust next to a half-empty bottle of wild turkey. Depression, it turned out, was heavy, not sad, not angry, just heavy. Like someone had filled his bones with concrete and every movement required conscious effort. Getting out of bed was a negotiation. Showering was a compromise. Eating was an afterthought. He slept in his truck most nights, not because he had to, but because the apartment felt haunted. Too many memories, too much silence. At least in the truck, with the windows cracked and the parking lot lights casting orange shadows on the ceiling, he could pretend he was somewhere else, someone else. Biscuit stayed in the apartment. Jackson came back every morning to feed him, to let him out, to scratch behind his ears and apologize for being such lousy company. The dog didn't seem to mind. He just curled up on his bed and waited. On the 8th night, Jackson sat in the cab of his F-150 and thought about driving into the concrete barrier on I-30. He didn't do it. He wasn't that kind of man, but he thought about it. Wondered how fast he'd have to be going. Wondered if anyone would notice. Wondered if Jenna would feel guilty or relieved or nothing at all. Then his phone buzzed. It was Ruddy, his dispatcher. Emergency call. Frozen line at the Whataburger on Greenville. Double time. You available? Jackson stared at the text. Then he typed back, on my way. He fixed the frozen line. He fixed a condenser at a strip mall in Richardson. He fixed a rooftop unit at a church in Garland where the pastor thanked him with a handshake and $20 cash. Work. That's what saved him, not therapy, not alcohol, not the concerned phone calls from Marcus or the casseroles left by his neighbor Mrs. Patterson, just work. The simple act of diagnosing a problem and solving it, point A to point B, cause and effect. On the 15th day, he opened the letter again. He read it slowly this time, looked up the words he didn't understand. Eagle Ford Shale. Mineral rights, royalty interests, production bonuses. Then he called the number at the bottom. Hargrove and Associates, this is Linda. My name's Jackson Cole. I got a letter about my grandfather's property. Oh, yes, Mr. Cole, the woman's voice warmed. We've been trying to reach you. Mr. Hargrove will want to speak with you directly. Can you hold? Jackson held. 2 minutes later, a man's voice came on the line. Jackson, this is Dale Hargrove. I was your grandfather's attorney for 30 years. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Listen, son, I don't know how much you know about what's happening down here, but you need to get to Karnes City. Soon. There's an opportunity that won't wait forever, and you're sitting on top of it. Jackson drove down 3 days later. Karnes City was 3.5 hours south of Dallas, past Austin, past San Antonio, into the brush country where the mesquite grew thick and the sky seemed to go on forever. It was a nothing town. A main street with a courthouse and a feed store and a diner called Rosie's that probably hadn't changed its menu since 1952. But something was different now. Something was happening. Pickup trucks everywhere. Not old beaters like Jackson's, but new ones. F-250s and Silverados with company logos on the doors. Men in hard hats walking the streets. A trailer park that hadn't existed 6 months ago, filled with workers from Oklahoma and Louisiana and places Jackson had never heard of. The Eagle Ford Shale boom had arrived. Dale Hargrove's office was above the hardware store. He was a small man, maybe 70, with wire-rimmed glasses and a bolo tie that looked like it had been in his family for generations. Your grandfather was a stubborn son of a bitch, Dale said, pouring coffee from a pot that had seen better days. Refused to sell that land no matter how many times the developers came calling. Said his daddy had died on that dirt and he'd be damned if some suit from Houston was gonna turn it into a subdivision. Sounds like him. Well, turns out the old man was right. That useless dirt farm is sitting on top of one of the richest oil deposits in the country. Maverick Energy has been sniffing around for 6 months. They want a drill. Jackson took the coffee. It was thick enough to stand a spoon in. What does that mean for me? It means you have options, son. You can sell the land outright. Maverick offered $400,000 last I heard, or, Dale leaned forward. You can lease the mineral rights, keep the surface rights, let them drill, and you get a percentage of everything that comes out of the ground. How much? Depends on the lease. But with a good landman negotiating on your behalf, signing bonus of $200,000 easy, maybe $250, plus monthly royalties that could run $20,000, $30,000 every month for as long as the well produces. Jackson set down his coffee cup. That's a lot of money. Yes, it is, Dale smiled. Your grandfather didn't believe in banks or lawyers or fancy investments. But he believed in land, and it looks like that belief is about to pay off in ways even he couldn't have imagined. Faith Delgado was waiting for him at Rosie's diner. She was younger than Jackson expected. Maybe 29. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, jeans and boots and a denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She looked like she'd just come from a job site, which, according to Dale, she had. Jackson Cole? She stood and shook his hand. Her grip was firm. Faith Delgado, I'm the landman representing your interests with Maverick. Landman? Land agent. I negotiate leases between property owners and energy companies. Make sure the little guy doesn't get screwed by the big guy. She sat back down and gestured for him to do the same. You want coffee? Just had some at Dale's. That sludge, you're braver than you look, she flagged down the waitress. 2 waters and the chicken fried steak for me. You hungry? Not really. Faith studied him across the table. She had sharp eyes, the kind that didn't miss much. Dale tells me you're going through a rough time. Divorce. Money trouble. He says you almost threw away the letter. That's not anyone's business. Maybe not, but it's context. She pulled a folder from her bag. I'm going to tell you something that a lot of people in my position wouldn't, so listen carefully. Jackson listened. Maverick Energy is offering you a standard lease. 20% royalty, 3-year term, signing bonus of $150. It's a fair offer. Most landowners would take it and be happy. But you've got leverage. The Eagle Ford is the hottest play in the country right now. Every major company is fighting for acreage. Maverick wants your grandfather's land because it sits right in the middle of their drilling path. If you hold out, they'll raise the offer. And if you're willing to walk away, they'll raise it again. Jackson looked at the folder, at the numbers, at the zeros that seemed to multiply every time he blinked. How much are we talking? Faith smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen in weeks. Let me make some calls. The final offer came 2 weeks later. $250,000 signing bonus. 25% royalty interest. 5-year lease with an option to renew. And a clause that Faith had insisted on. If Maverick didn't drill within 18 months, the lease terminated automatically. Jackson signed the papers in Dale Hargrove's office on a Tuesday afternoon. The check arrived by courier on Thursday. He held it in his hands for a long time. $250,000, more money than he'd made in the last 10 years combined. More money than his father had ever seen in his life. And it was just the beginning. That night, Jackson sat in his apartment with Biscuit at his feet. He'd quit sleeping in the truck. He'd turned the AC back on. He'd even bought groceries, real groceries, not ramen and peanut butter. He opened his laptop. He wasn't sure why, maybe just to feel connected to something, maybe just to see what the world was doing without him. He found himself on Facebook. Jenna's profile was still visible. They hadn't unfriended each other. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe she didn't care. Her latest post was from that morning, a photo of her and Garrett in what looked like a fancy apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows, leather furniture, a view of the Dallas skyline, new beginnings, grateful for this man and this life. Blessed living Thedream Jackson looked at the photo. Then he looked closer. The furniture, something was off. The tags were still on the couch cushions. The coffee table had a rental company sticker on the bottom. The art on the walls was generic hotel room stuff, the kind you buy in bulk from a warehouse. It was all rented, the whole thing, the whole life. A stage set designed to look impressive from a distance. Jackson closed the laptop. He thought about the money in his account. He thought about the royalties that would start flowing next month. He thought about all the things he could buy: a new truck, a house, a life that looked like Garrett's fake one. But that's not what he wanted. He wanted something else, something that had been growing in his chest since the night of the gala, since he'd heard Garrett begging a bank for mercy, since he'd watched Jenna climb into that rented truck without looking back. He wanted the truth to come out. He wanted everyone to see what he saw: the fake watch, the fake apartment, the fake life. He picked up his phone and called Faith. "It's Jackson. Jackson, is everything okay with the lease?" "The lease is fine. I have a question for you." "Shoot," he paused. The words felt strange in his mouth, like they belonged to someone else. "How do I buy a debt?" Silence on the other end. Then Faith laughed, not mocking, more like surprised. "That's not a question I get every day." "Can it be done?" "Depends on the debt. Why do you ask?" Jackson leaned back in his camping chair. Biscuit raised his head, sensing something in the air. "Because there's a man in Dallas who owes a lot of people a lot of money, and I think I want to be one of the people he owes." Another silence, longer this time. "Jackson," Faith said slowly, "are you talking about what I think you're talking about?" "Maybe. This sounds personal." "It is. Personal debts have a way of getting complicated." "I don't mind complicated," Faith exhaled. He could hear her thinking, weighing the risks. "Okay," she said finally. "Let me do some research, no promises. But if there's a legal way to do what you're asking, I'll find it." "Thank you, Faith." "Don't thank me yet," she paused. "You know, most people who come into money suddenly, they buy boats, vacation homes, fancy cars. They don't ask how to buy someone else's debt. I'm not most people." "No," he could hear the smile in her voice. "No, you're definitely not." Jackson hung up. He sat in the darkness for a long time, stroking Biscuit's ears, watching the headlights move across the ceiling. The money had changed things, but it hadn't changed him. He was still the same man who crawled across rooftops in the heat, the same man who fixed broken things while other people broke them. The only difference was now he had resources. Now he could fix something bigger. 6 weeks after the check cleared, Jackson Cole was still crawling across rooftops in the Texas heat. Same truck, same uniform, same 12-hour shifts fixing compressors and replacing capacitors for people who looked right through him. The only differences were invisible. His teeth didn't ache anymore. The F-150 had new brakes. And there was a number in his bank account that would have made the old Jackson weep. But the new Jackson didn't weep. The new Jackson was planning. "You're insane," Faith said. They were sitting in a booth at Norma's Cafe on Davis Street, the kind of place where the coffee was burnt and the chicken fried steak could stop your heart. Faith had driven up from Carnes City that morning. She was wearing jeans and a blazer, her hair pulled back, a legal pad covered in notes sitting between them. "Probably," Jackson said, "but I'm also right. You want to buy a building, not invest in a building, not put money into a REIT. You want to buy an actual commercial property in Dallas with cash." "That's what I said. And not just any building. The specific building where your ex-wife's boyfriend works. He's not her boyfriend, he's her mistake." Faith leaned back. She had this way of looking at him like she was trying to read the fine print on his soul. "Jackson, I'm a landman. I negotiate mineral leases. I don't do whatever this is. But you know people who do. I know people who do a lot of things. That doesn't mean I should introduce you to them." She picked up her coffee, took a sip, made a face. "This tastes like motor oil. You get used to it. I don't want to get used to it." She set the cup down. "Look, I like you. You're one of the few clients I've had who actually listened to my advice. But what you're describing sounds like revenge, and revenge is expensive. Emotionally and financially." Jackson shook his head. "It's not revenge." "Then what is it?" He thought about it. The right words were hard to find. They always had been. "You ever see someone lie, really lie, not just a little white lie, but a whole life built on nothing?" He traced a line in the condensation on his water glass. "Garrett Whitmore is a fraud, the watch is fake, the car is leased. The money doesn't exist, but everyone believes him because he wears a nice suit and talks with confidence. So my wife left me for a lie, and that's her choice. But every day that lie keeps working, every day he gets away with it, more people get hurt. The employees who trust him, the investors who believe his numbers, the next woman after Jenna." Jackson looked up. "I'm not trying to hurt him, I'm trying to expose him. There's a difference." Faith was quiet for a long moment, then she pulled out her phone. "I know a guy," she said. Commercial real estate attorney, helped me with some property disputes back when I was starting out. He's expensive, but he's good. Money's not a problem. That's the first time you've said that. It's the first time it's been true. Faith smiled. It was a small smile, cautious but real. Okay, Jackson Cole, let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes. The rabbit hole went deep. Over the next 2 weeks, Jackson learned more about commercial real estate than he'd ever wanted to know. Zoning laws, lease structures, CAM charges, and triple net agreements. He sat in Faith's attorney's office. A sharp-dressed guy named Bernard Webb who worked out of a converted warehouse in the design district, and he listened. Prestige Logistics doesn't own their building, Bernard said, spreading documents across his desk. They lease it, have for 12 years. The building itself is owned by a trust based out of Houston. Absentee landlord situation. Classic. Who's the landlord? Estate of a guy named Marvin Kettleman, died 3 years ago. His kids have been trying to sell ever since, but the building has problems. Jackson leaned forward. What kind of problems? Deferred maintenance. The HVAC system is original to the structure. 1987, it's a miracle it still runs. Bernard looked at Jackson. But you already knew that, didn't you? I've worked on that system for 6 years. I know every compressor, every duct, every corroded wire. Then you know it needs about $200,000 in repairs, minimum. More like $250. The cooling tower is shot. They've been nursing it along with Band-Aids and prayers. Bernard smiled. The Kettleman kids know that too. They've been trying to unload this thing for 18 months. No takers. The maintenance costs are eating into any potential profit. Faith pulled out her notepad. What's the asking price? They started at $1.2 million. They're down to $850. My guess is they'd take $7 if someone offered cash with a quick close. $700,000. Jackson did the math. He had the signing bonus. He had royalties coming in now, $18,000 last month with more wells being drilled. It was tight, but it was possible. What about the lease? He asked. Prestige Logistics, how long do they have? Bernard flipped through more papers. Expires in 94 days. Renewal clause requires 90 days notice, which means they've got 4 days to either renew or start looking for new space. And if new ownership declines to renew, then Prestige Logistics has 90 days to vacate or negotiate new terms with the new landlord. Jackson sat back. He could feel it now, the shape of the thing, the way all the pieces fit together. I want to buy that building. Bernard raised an eyebrow. Just like that. Just like that. Cash offer, $700,000, 30-day close. Jackson paused. But not in my name. You want an LLC. I want a shell company, something that can't be traced back to me. Bernard and Faith exchanged a look. That's not illegal, Bernard said carefully. But it does raise questions about your intentions. My intentions are simple. I want to own a piece of commercial real estate. I want to be a landlord. What's more American than that? 3 days later, Jackson drove to a junkyard in Mesquite. The sign out front said Coles Auto Salvage, but that was a lie. It hadn't been Coles in 20 years, not since Jackson's uncle had sold it to pay gambling debts. The current owner was a man named Trevor Hinz, 55 years old, 300 pounds, with a beard like a wire brush and hands that could crush an engine block. Trevor had taught Jackson everything he knew about machines. Not in a classroom, not from a book. In the dirt and the grease and the 100-degree Texas summers, pulling engines and rebuilding transmissions and learning that everything in the world could be fixed if you understood how it worked. Well, Trevor was sitting in a lawn chair outside his trailer, drinking a Lone Star and watching a stray dog dig through a pile of scrap. The prodigal son returns. Hey, Trev. Don't hey, Trev me. You disappeared for 6 months. I heard about Jenna. I heard about the money. I heard about a lot of things. He took a long drink. You didn't call. I know. You were sleeping in your truck like a damn fool and you didn't call. I know, Trev. I'm sorry, Trevor grunted. He gestured to a second lawn chair, rusted and patched with duct tape. Sit down. Tell me why you're here. Jackson sat. He looked out at the yard, acres of dead cars stacked 3 high in some places, a graveyard of American manufacturing. He'd spent his teenage summers here, best years of his life. I need a partner, he said. For what? I'm buying a building. A building, Trevor laughed. It was a big laugh, the kind that came from the belly. Boy, you don't know anything about buildings. I know how to fix them, and I know who owns them. Trevor stopped laughing. He looked at Jackson with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. This is about Garrett Whitmore. How do you know that name? Because I'm not an idiot, and because Ruddy told me about the gala, how they made you leave through the service entrance. How your wife stayed behind. Trevor shook his head. That's a special kind of hurt. It is. And you want to hurt him back. No, Jackson leaned forward. I want to own him, there's a difference. He explained the plan, the building, the lease, the shell company, the way all the pieces fit together. Trevor listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When Jackson finished, Trevor was quiet for a long time. You know what your problem is, Jackson? What? You think too much, you always have. Your uncle was the same way, always planning, always scheming, always 3 steps ahead. Trevor finished his beer and crushed the can. It didn't end well for him. I'm not my uncle. No, you're not. Trevor stood up. You're smarter. And you're angrier, that's a dangerous combination. So you won't help me. Trevor walked toward the trailer. He opened the door, reached inside, and pulled out a checkbook. I didn't say that, I said it's dangerous. He sat back down. How much do you need? I'm not asking for money, Trev. Then what are you asking for? A name, a face, someone who can sign papers and show up at meetings. Someone who isn't me, Trevor understood. You want me to be the front. I want you to be my partner, Cold Chain Holdings, 50-50. That's a stupid name. I know, I made it up last night. Trevor laughed again. This time it was quieter, almost sad. Your grandfather would have loved this, you know. Harold always said the best revenge was outliving your enemies, but owning them. That's even better. Is that a yes? Trevor extended his hand. His grip was like iron. That's a yes, now let's go steal a building. The offer was accepted on a Thursday. $710,000, cash, 30-day close. The Kettleman kids practically tripped over themselves to sign. Bernard handled the paperwork. Trevor showed up at the closing in a suit he'd bought at JCPenney an hour earlier, shook hands with the sellers, and signed his name where the attorneys pointed. Cold Chain Holdings was now the proud owner of a 3-story commercial building off Stemmons Freeway, and Jackson Cole was Garrett Whitmore's landlord. He stood outside the building that night, after everyone had gone home. The streetlights cast long shadows across the parking lot. Through the windows, he could see the cleaning crew vacuuming the carpets, emptying the trash, keeping the lie running for another day. Somewhere in that building, in a corner office with a view of the skyline, was the man who had taken his wife, the man who had made him crawl, the man who smiled at the world while the world crumbled beneath his feet. Jackson didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He just stood there in the darkness, feeling the weight of what he'd done. The first domino had fallen. Now it was time to tip the rest. The letter arrived at Prestige Logistics on a Monday morning. It was printed on Cold Chain Holdings letterhead, which Bernard had designed to look appropriately corporate and boring. And it said, in the polite language of real estate law, that the building had new ownership, that a routine audit of all systems would be conducted, and that, pursuant to Section 12.4 of the existing lease agreement, rent would be adjusted to reflect current market rates. The new rent was 40% higher. Jackson wasn't there to see Garrett's reaction, but he heard about it later from Faith, who heard about it from Bernard, who heard about it from the property manager they'd hired to handle the day-to-day. He threw a phone, Faith reported. Actually threw it, hit the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. Sounds about right. Then he called the number on the letterhead and screamed at the receptionist for 20 minutes. What did she say? Nothing, we don't have a receptionist, it goes to voicemail. They were sitting in Faith's car, parked across the street from a Whataburger on Northwest Highway. Jackson was eating a bacon cheeseburger. Faith was picking at a salad. He's panicking, Faith said. The rent increase alone would put him in the red. He doesn't have reserves, everything he has is leveraged. I know. So what's next? Jackson wiped his hands on a napkin. The audit, I need to get inside that building. As Jackson Cole? As a contractor, the property manager needs someone to check the meters, make sure everything's up to code. The new ownership wants to know what they're dealing with. Faith shook her head. That's risky if Garrett sees you. Garrett won't look twice at a guy in work clothes. He never did before. Why would he start now? 3 days later, Jackson walked through the front door of Prestige Logistics. He was wearing his old uniform. The gray shirt, the work boots, the tool belt around his waist. He had a clipboard and a flashlight and a badge that said Cold Chain Holdings Maintenance. The receptionist barely looked at him. Service entrance is in the back. I'm here for the meter audit. Property manager sent me. She checked her computer. I don't have anything scheduled. It was just added. New ownership wants everything documented. He held up the clipboard. Should take about an hour. I'll need access to the utility rooms on each floor. The receptionist sighed the sigh of someone who dealt with inconveniences all day. Fine, I'll get someone to escort you. That someone turned out to be a facilities coordinator named Derek, a 23-year-old kid with a goatee and a Spurs jersey under his blazer. He led Jackson through the building, chattering about fantasy football and his girlfriend's drama, while Jackson took notes on everything he saw. The electrical panels were outdated. The water heater was on its last legs. The HVAC system was worse than he'd thought. The compressors were running at half capacity, and someone had jerry-rigged a bypass on the cooling tower that was probably a fire hazard. But that wasn't what interested him. What interested him was the accounting. On the second floor, Jackson found a maintenance log tucked behind one of the utility panels. It was supposed to document every repair, every service call, every dollar spent on keeping the building functional. But the numbers didn't add up. According to the log, Prestige Logistics had spent $40,000 on HVAC maintenance in the past year. Jackson had done most of that work himself. He knew for a fact they'd spent less than 15. Someone was cooking the books, deferring maintenance costs on paper while pocketing the difference. Jackson photographed every page. "Are you still doing this grunt work, Jackson?" He froze. Jenna was standing in the hallway, a stack of folders in her arms. She was thinner than he remembered, pale. The glow that had surrounded her at the gala was gone, replaced by something tired and brittle. "Jenna." "I heard we had someone checking the meters." She forced a smile. "I didn't realize it was you. Work is work." "Right, of course." She shifted the folders to her other arm. "How are you? Are you okay?" There it was, the pity. She was looking at him the way you look at a stray dog, the way you look at someone you've decided is beneath you. "I'm fine." "Good, that's good." She glanced down the hallway like she was worried someone would see them talking. "Look, Jackson, I know things ended badly between us, but if you ever need anything, money or a reference or—" "I don't need anything from you, Jenna." Her face flickered. Surprise, maybe hurt. She wasn't used to being refused. "I'm just trying to help." "No, you're not." Jackson clipped his flashlight to his belt. "You're trying to make yourself feel better about what you did. You want me to be struggling so you can tell yourself you made the right choice." "That's not fair." "Probably not, but it's true." He walked past her down the hallway toward the stairs. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel her standing there, watching him go, trying to figure out what had changed. Everything, Jenna, everything had changed. The last thing Jackson did before leaving was install the thermostat lock. It was a small device, no bigger than a deck of cards. It connected to the building's HVAC control system and allowed remote access to the temperature settings. Technically, it was a building management tool. Practically, it was a weapon. Jackson installed it in the utility closet on the third floor, hidden behind a tangle of wires and pipes. Then he tested it from his phone, watching the numbers change on the screen. He now controlled the temperature of Garrett Whitmore's world. The heat was coming. And this time, Jackson would decide when it arrived. August came back with a vengeance. 108 degrees. The kind of heat that made the asphalt bubble and the power grid groan and the whole city of Dallas feel like it was slowly being cooked. The TV weathermen stood in front of their maps and warned people to stay inside, drink water, check on elderly neighbors. Jackson sat in his truck across the street from Prestige Logistics and opened the app on his phone. The building's temperature was currently set to 72 degrees, comfortable, professional. The kind of climate-controlled environment where people wore blazers and complained if someone opened a window. Jackson moved the slider. 75, 80, 85. He hit save, put the phone in his pocket, and drove away. The complaints started within the hour. Faith called him that afternoon, laughing so hard she could barely speak. He called the property management line 6 times. 6 times. The last message was just screaming. I couldn't even understand most of it. "What did you tell him?" "I didn't tell him anything." The property manager called him back and quoted Section 8.3 of the lease. HVAC repairs under $10,000 are the tenant's responsibility. And he lost his mind. He said it was sabotage. He said he was going to sue. He said a lot of words I can't repeat in polite company. Jackson pulled into the parking lot of a Kroger. He needed to buy dog food for Biscuit. What's he going to do? That's the thing, he can't do anything. He doesn't have the money. The company credit cards are maxed. His personal accounts are empty. I did some digging. Faith paused. Actually, maybe I shouldn't tell you this. Tell me. He's taking pills for his stomach, ulcer medication. My contact at the pharmacy says he's been refilling the prescription every 2 weeks. He's burning through it. Jackson sat in the truck, engine running, AC blasting. He thought about Garrett Whitmore, sweating in his corner office, popping pills to keep his stomach from eating itself alive. He should have felt satisfied. He didn't. What happens next? That depends on him. He's got 3 options. 1, he finds the money somewhere legitimate. 2, he convinces corporate to cover the repair. Or 3, he does something stupid. He does something stupid. Faith's voice was serious now. Jackson, if he breaks the law, we have to be careful. We can't be seen as entrapping him. Everything we've done has to be above board. It is above board. I bought a building. I raised the rent. I let the tenant handle their own maintenance. That's business. I know, but if he cracks and it looks like we pushed him, he's going to crack, Faith. That's the whole point. Men like Garrett don't know how to lose. They'd rather burn everything down than admit they were wrong. Silence on the other end. Then Faith sighed. Just be careful, okay? This is the dangerous part. The dangerous part came 3 days later. Jackson was at Trevor's junkyard helping him pull an alternator from a 1992 Camaro when his phone buzzed. It was an alert from the building management software. Someone was accessing the main data network. He wiped his hands on a rag and opened the app. "What is it?" Trevor asked. "Someone's moving money." The screen showed a wire transfer authorization. $53,000 originating from something called the Prestige Logistics Employee Pension Fund. Destination, Reliable Climate Control, LLC. The memo line said emergency HVAC repair. Jackson stared at the numbers. That son of a bitch. What? He's stealing from the pension fund. He's taking the employees' retirement money to pay for the AC repair. Trevor set down his wrench. Can he do that? No, that's embezzlement. That's prison time. So what do you do? Jackson looked at the screen, at the numbers, at the evidence that Garrett Whitmore had just committed a federal crime. I call Faith. Faith arrived at the junkyard 2 hours later. She was carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who'd just been told they won the lottery, but the ticket was on fire. This is big, she said, spreading documents across Trevor's kitchen table. This is really, really big. How big? Pension fraud is a federal offense. If he used those funds without authorization from the board of directors, he's looking at 10 to 20 years. Trevor whistled. That's more than my first marriage. But here's the thing. Faith pointed to a document. We can't just call the cops, not yet. If we do, Garrett goes to prison, but the company goes under. The employees lose their jobs, their pensions, everything. So what's the alternative? We go to corporate, to the board of directors, we show them what Garrett did, and we offer them a way out. Jackson frowned. What kind of way out? We buy the branch, the debt, the assets, everything. We take control before the whole thing implodes. The employees keep their jobs, the pension gets restored, and Garrett goes away. Garrett goes away. Jackson looked at the documents, at the numbers, at the shape of what was about to happen. How much would that cost? Faith did some calculations on her phone. The branch is hemorrhaging money. Garrett's been hiding the losses for months. If we offer to assume the debt and inject capital, the board might sell for less than it's worth on paper. Maybe 300,000, maybe less. I have that. I know you do. Faith looked at him. But this isn't just about money anymore, Jackson. If we do this, you become a boss. You become responsible for 50 employees and their families. That's not revenge. That's a job. Jackson thought about it, about the weight of it, about what it would mean to own not just a building, but a company, to have people depending on him. When can you set up the meeting? Faith smiled. I already did, Friday morning, 10 a.m. The board's flying in from Houston. The meeting happened in a conference room at the Adolphus Hotel. Not the same room where the gala had been. A smaller one on a lower floor with no chandeliers and no jazz band and no champagne. Just a long table, a pitcher of water, and 6 people who would decide the fate of Prestige Logistics. The board of directors consisted of 4 people. 2 men in their 60s who looked like they'd rather be golfing, a woman in her 50s who took notes on everything, and a younger man with glasses who didn't say a word. Faith did most of the talking. She laid out the evidence. The falsified maintenance records, the deferred costs, the pension fund theft. She had charts and graphs and documentation that made even the note-taking woman put down her pen. In summary, Faith said, your regional manager has been running a fraudulent operation for at least 18 months. The losses are substantial. The legal exposure is significant. And if this becomes public, the damage to your brand will be catastrophic. The older men exchanged looks. The one on the left cleared his throat. And you're offering to? What exactly? To make it go away? Faith slid a folder across the table. Cold Chain Holdings will purchase the Dallas branch. We assume the debt, restore the pension fund, and retain all current employees. In exchange, you walk away clean. Walk away with what? With your reputation intact, with no lawsuits, with a clean break. The woman picked up the folder. What about Garrett? That's between him and law enforcement. Will cooperate fully with any investigation. The room was quiet. Jackson sat at the end of the table, saying nothing. He was wearing his work boots and a button-down shirt. Not trying to impress anyone, just being what he was, the man with glasses spoke for the first time. Why do you want this? The branch is a money pit. Even without Garrett's theft, the margins are thin. Jackson answered before Faith could. Because I know how to fix things. Everyone looked at him. That building has been falling apart for years. Nobody wanted to spend the money to maintain it properly. But I know that building. I know every system, every flaw, every shortcut that's been taken. He leaned forward. I can turn it around, not by cutting costs, but by investing in infrastructure, by treating the employees like assets instead of expenses, by running a business instead of a con. The board members looked at each other. Something passed between them, a silent conversation that Jackson couldn't read. We need to discuss this privately, the older man said. Give us an hour. The hour lasted 47 minutes. Faith and Jackson waited in the lobby, drinking bad coffee from a cart near the elevators. Neither of them spoke much. There wasn't much to say. Either the board would accept the offer or they wouldn't. Either Jackson would own the company or he'd go back to fixing air conditioners for people who didn't know his name. Finally, the woman with the notepad appeared. We have a deal, she said. $320,000, closing on Friday. Faith shook her hand. Jackson stood there trying to process what had just happened. There's one condition, the woman added. Garrett Whitmore is terminated immediately. We'll handle the paperwork, but we want him out of the building before the close. That won't be a problem, Faith said. And Mr. Cole? The woman looked at him. The employees don't know any of this. As far as they're concerned, this is a corporate restructuring. We'd appreciate discretion. Jackson nodded. I understand. Good, she smiled. It was a thin smile, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. Welcome to the logistics business, Mr. Cole. I hope you know what you're getting into. The paperwork was signed on Friday afternoon. Bernard had offices in the design district. Cold Chain Holdings took possession of all assets, all debts, and all 53 employees of the Dallas branch. The pension fund was restored with money from Jackson's account. The fraudulent records were sealed pending investigation. And Garrett Whitmore was gone, not arrested, not yet. The board had asked for the weekend to coordinate with legal counsel, which Faith said was code for figure out how to spin this. But he was out of the building, out of the company, out of options. Jackson stood in the empty parking lot that night looking up at the building he now owned. His building, his company, his responsibility, his phone buzzed, a text from Trevor. So what now, boss? Jackson typed back. Now we wait. Monday morning. What happens Monday morning? Jackson looked at the corner office on the 3rd floor. The lights were off. Nobody home. Monday morning, I introduce myself. He put the phone away and walked to his truck. Biscuit was waiting in the passenger seat, tail wagging, oblivious to everything that had happened. Good boy, Jackson said, scratching behind his ears. Let's go home. The first part was over. The building was his. The company was his. The trap was set. Now came the hard part. Now came the reckoning. Monday morning. 8:47 a.m. The conference room on the 3rd floor of Prestige Logistics was freezing cold. Not uncomfortable cold. Not someone left the AC on too high cold. This was deliberate, calculated, 62 degrees to be exact. Jackson had set it himself the night before using the same app he'd used to make Garrett sweat. But this time the temperature served a different purpose. Cold rooms made people alert. Cold rooms made people remember. Jackson stood in the lobby of the building he owned, watching the employees file in through the front entrance. They looked nervous. Word had spread over the weekend that something was happening. Layoffs, maybe, restructuring. Nobody knew the details, but everyone felt the tension. At 8:52, Garrett Whitmore's BMW pulled into the executive parking spot. Jackson watched from behind a pillar as Garrett stepped out. He was wearing his best suit, the navy blue one with the subtle pinstripes. His fake Patek Philippe gleamed on his wrist. His hair was perfect. His shoes were shined. But his face told a different story, dark circles under his eyes, a tightness around his jaw. The look of a man who hadn't slept in days, who was running on caffeine and desperation, and the fading hope that somehow this would all work out. Jenna got out of the passenger side. She was wearing a red dress, the same red she'd worn the day Jackson had seen her through the skylight. Some kind of armor, maybe, some kind of statement. They walked into the building together. Garrett's hand on her back, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Jackson let them pass. They didn't see him. They never did. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. By 8:58, every employee of the Dallas branch was crammed into the third-floor conference room. 53 people, standing room only, pressed against the walls and clustered near the door. The mood was funeral home quiet. Garrett stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Jenna sat on the arm of his chair, literally perched there like a bird of prey surveying the room. Her hand rested on his shoulder, possessive, protective. "I know there have been rumors," Garrett began. His voice was smooth, practiced. The same voice he used to sell clients on impossible timelines and inflated projections. "I want to address them directly." The room held its breath. "This company is facing challenges, market challenges, challenges that are not the fault of any single person in this room." He paused, letting that sink in. "But challenges require difficult decisions, and difficult decisions require leadership." Someone coughed. The air conditioning hummed. "Over the next few weeks, we'll be implementing a restructuring plan. Some positions will be eliminated. Some responsibilities will be consolidated." Garrett spread his hands, the picture of reluctant authority. "I want you to know that I fought for every single one of you. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie." Jenna leaned close to his ear. Her whisper was meant to be private, but in the silent room it carried. "It's okay, baby, you have the power." A few employees exchanged glances. The intimacy of the gesture was jarring, inappropriate, but nobody said anything. Nobody ever did. Garrett cleared his throat. "Now I've prepared a list of the affected positions. I know this is difficult, but I want to be transparent about." The conference room doors swung open. Faith Delgado walked in like she owned the place, which technically she represented the people who did. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and black slacks, her hair pulled back, a leather folder tucked under her arm. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she approached the table. Every head in the room turned to watch her. Garrett's face went pale. "Who the hell are you?" Faith stopped at the opposite end of the table. She set down the leather folder. She looked at Garrett with the kind of calm that comes from holding all the cards. "Mr. Garrett," she said, "please step away from the head of the table." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Step away from the head of the table." "That seat is no longer yours." Garrett laughed. It was a nervous laugh, high and tight, but he tried to make it sound confident. "I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but this is my company, my meeting, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." "By all means." Faith gestured toward the door. "Call them. I'll wait." The room was dead silent. 53 people frozen in place, watching something they didn't understand. And then the doors opened again. Jackson Cole walked into the conference room. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Not expensive, he'd bought it off the rack at Men's Warehouse, but it fit him perfectly. Dark gray, single-breasted, with a white shirt underneath and no tie. His hair was combed. His jaw was clean-shaven, and on his feet, polished to a mirror shine, were his brown-red wing-work boots. The same boots he'd worn on the rooftop. The same boots that had melted on the black tar paper while Jenna laughed in Garrett's air-conditioned office. The same boots that had tracked mud across the marble lobby while the receptionist wrinkled her nose. He'd polished them himself that morning, spent 20 minutes on it, because he wanted Garrett to see them, wanted Garrett to remember. Jackson walked past the stunned employees, past the whispers and the confusion, all the way to the head of the table where Garrett stood. Garrett stared at him, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. What is this? The repair guy. He laughed again, but this time there was no confidence in it, just fear. Is this some kind of joke? Jenna, do you know what's happening? Jenna had gone white. She was still sitting on the arm of the chair, but her hand had slipped off Garrett's shoulder. She was staring at Jackson like she was seeing a ghost. Jackson? Her voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? Jackson didn't answer her. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. A single piece of paper folded in thirds with the official seal of Dallas County at the bottom. He dropped it on the table. The deed to this building, he said. His voice was calm, level. The voice of a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times and no longer needed to rehearse. I bought it 3 months ago through a company called Cold Chain Holdings. Maybe you've heard of them. Garrett grabbed the document. His hands were shaking. That's not possible. The Kettleman estate. Sold to me. Cash offer, 30-day close. Jackson pulled out another document. And this is the bill of sale for the Dallas branch of Prestige Logistics. Signed by your board of directors last Friday. All assets, all debts, all employees, transferred to Cold Chain Holdings effective immediately. He dropped that document on top of the first. Meet the new owner. You're both fired. The coffee cup hit the floor before anyone could react. Jenna had been holding it when Jackson walked in. A white ceramic mug with the Prestige Logistics logo on the side, half full of cold coffee she'd forgotten to drink. When the words registered, when the reality of what was happening finally broke through the shock, her fingers went slack. The cup fell, hit the hardwood, shattered into a dozen pieces, spraying coffee across the polished floor. And then Jenna collapsed, not a dramatic faint. Not a movie-style swoon, she just crumpled, slid off the arm of the chair and sank into the seat itself, her face blank, her eyes unfocused. Like someone had pulled the plug on whatever was keeping her upright. The room erupted. Whispers became murmurs, murmurs became voices. 53 people trying to process what they'd just witnessed, what it meant, what happened next. Garrett was still holding the documents. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. This is insane, he said. This is absolutely insane. You can't just walk in here and... I can, Jackson said. I did, and now I'm asking you to leave. The hell I will. Garrett threw the papers on the table. I built this company. I made it what it is. You think you can buy your way in and... You didn't build anything, Garrett. You borrowed, you leveraged, you cooked the books and deferred the maintenance and stole from the pension fund to cover your failures. Jackson stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat on Garrett's forehead. I know everything. I've known for months. That's a lie. Section 8.3 of your lease says HVAC repairs under $10,000 are the tenant's responsibility. You didn't have the money, so you took $53,000 from the employee pension fund. Wire transfer. I have the records. Garrett's face went gray. How do you? That's confidential. That's private company. I own the building. I own the network. I own everything. Jackson's voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now, something cold. You stole from these people, Garrett, the people who trusted you, the people who worked for you, and you were about to fire them to cover it up. The room had gone silent again. Every employee was listening, every employee was watching, and every employee was starting to understand. Jackson pulled out the chair at the head of the table, not Garrett's chair, his chair, the owner's chair. He sat down, adjusted his jacket, looked out at the room full of stunned faces. Security, he said, please escort the trespassers out. 2 men in uniforms appeared at the door. Faith had arranged them the night before, private security hired specifically for this moment. They walked into the room, positioned themselves on either side of Garrett, and waited. This is ridiculous. Garrett's voice was rising now, desperate. You have no authority here. You have no proof of anything. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the board. The board sold you out, Garrett. Jackson pulled out his phone. They knew about the pension theft. They knew you were going under. They were happy to take our money and wash their hands of you. You're lying. You're making all of this up. Jackson tapped the screen. A recording started to play. Yes, this is Garrett Whitmore. I need to authorize an emergency transfer from the pension reserve account. $53,000, account number. The voice was unmistakable, clear, damning. Garrett's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The recording continued, every word a nail in a coffin he'd built himself. Yes, I understand the implications. Just do it. I'll handle the paperwork later. Jackson stopped the recording. You recorded me? Garrett's voice was a whisper now. That's illegal. You can't use that. That's inadmissible. Maybe, maybe not. That's for the lawyers to sort out. Jackson slipped the phone back into his pocket. But the employees you were about to fire, they just heard it. They know what you did, and they're going to remember. Garrett looked around the room, at the faces of the people he'd managed for years, the people he'd bought drinks for at company parties, the people he'd promised promotions and bonuses that never materialized. Nobody would meet his eyes. "Get him out of here," Jackson said. The security guard stepped forward. Garrett tried to pull away, but his resistance was weak. Symbolic, he let them take his arms, let them guide him toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "This isn't over, Cole. I have lawyers. I have connections." "You think you can just—" "Goodbye, Garrett." The doors closed behind him. Jenna was still in the chair. She'd come back to herself somewhere during the recording, her eyes focusing, her hands gripping the armrests. But she hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just sat there watching her world collapse around her. Now, with Garrett gone, she finally looked at Jackson. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice was small, hollow. "Jackson, I swear I didn't know he was stealing. I thought he was just rich." "Yes," she swallowed. "I thought he was rich." Jackson stood up. He walked around the table, past the shattered remains of the coffee cup until he was standing in front of her. "I believe you didn't know about the money, Jenna. I believe you didn't know about the pension fund." Thank you, Jackson, But you knew he was a bad man," she stopped. "You knew he was cruel, you knew he treated people like dirt. You saw how he talked to the maintenance staff, the cleaning crew, the people who did the actual work while he played golf and took long lunches." Jackson's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You knew all of that and you didn't care because you thought he was rich and rich forgives everything." Jenna's eyes filled with tears. "That's not, I was trying to." "To what? To escape, to find security." Jackson shook his head. "You left me for a lie, Jenna, not because you loved him, not because he was better than me, because you wanted his life more than you wanted mine. And his life was never real. Jackson, please. I'm sorry, but I can't trust you with the books. I can't trust you with the accounts. I can't trust you with anything that matters." He stepped back. "You're a liability, Jenna, and liabilities get cut." She stared at him. The tears were falling now, streaking her mascara, ruining the careful makeup she'd applied that morning. "You're firing me." "Yes, after everything, after everything." The room was silent. 52 employees watching their former boss's girlfriend get terminated by her ex-husband. It was the kind of scene that would be talked about for years. The kind of scene that would become company legend. Jenna stood up. Her legs were unsteady, but she managed. She smoothed her red dress. Wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I hope it was worth it," she said. "Whatever you had to become to do this, I hope it was worth it." She walked out of the conference room without looking back. Jackson watched her go. Then he turned to face the remaining employees. "I know this is a lot to process. I know you have questions. I know you're probably scared about what happens next." He paused. "I'm not going to fire anyone, not today, not because of what Garrett did. The pension fund will be restored. The company will continue. And if you're willing to work with me, I'm willing to work with you." Someone raised their hand. A young woman in the back, maybe 25, with glasses and a nervous expression. "Yes. Who are you? I mean, really?" Jackson smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled all morning. "I'm Jackson Cole. I used to fix the air conditioning in this building. Now I own it." He gestured around the room. "And I'm going to need a lot of help figuring out how to run it, so if anyone has ideas, my door is open." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the tension began to break. Someone laughed, not mocking, just surprised. Someone else started clapping. It spread through the room, hesitant at first, then building. Not applause for Jackson, applause for themselves, for surviving, for being on the right side of something for once. Jackson let them have the moment. Then his phone buzzed, a text from Faith. "Police are here, ready when you are," he typed back. "Send them up." The arrest happened quickly. 2 officers from the Dallas PD, accompanied by a detective in a rumpled suit, walked Garrett Whitmore out of the building in handcuffs. They'd found him in the parking lot, sitting in his BMW, staring at nothing. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just let them put him in the back of the squad car and drive away. Jackson watched from the lobby. Faith stood beside him. "How do you feel?" She asked. "I don't know." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Empty, maybe. I thought I'd feel more." "More what?" "Happy, satisfied, something." Faith nodded. "Revenge is like that. You build it up in your head, imagine how good it's going to feel, and then it happens and it's just done. The other person is gone, but you're still here. Still the same person you were before." Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you think. She turned to face him. What are you going to do now, Jackson? You own a building, you own a company, you have more money than you know what to do with. What's the plan? Jackson looked at the building, at the employees visible through the windows, getting back to work, trying to process what had happened. I guess I'm going to figure out how to be a boss. That's a start, Faith smiled. Call me if you need help. I know a few things about managing chaos. She walked toward her car. Jackson watched her go, then he went back inside. The first week was chaos. Jackson had never run a company before. He'd never managed more than a toolbox and a schedule. Now he had 52 employees looking to him for direction, a building that needed repairs, and a business model he barely understood. He made mistakes, a lot of them. He approved a purchase order without checking the budget. He scheduled 2 meetings at the same time. He accidentally called the head of accounting by the wrong name for 3 straight days until someone finally corrected him. But he also did some things right. He walked the floor every morning, introducing himself to people he'd never met. He asked questions about their jobs, their families, their concerns. He sat in on meetings he didn't understand, taking notes, learning the language of logistics and supply chains and quarterly projections. And on the second Friday, he called an all-hands meeting of his own. I've been looking at the personnel files, he said, at the performance reviews, at the promotion history. He held up a stack of folders. Some of you have been here for 10 years and never moved up. Some of you have been doing the work of 2 people while others took the credit. That ends now. He called out 5 names. 5 people who'd been overlooked, underpaid, undervalued. A warehouse supervisor who'd streamlined the shipping process. An accountant who'd caught errors that saved the company thousands. A receptionist who'd been handling HR duties without the title or the salary. Effective Monday, you're all getting promotions and raises. He set down the folders. I don't know everything about running a business, but I know how to recognize hard work. And I know how to reward it. The applause was real this time. Jenna texted him on a Tuesday night. He was sitting in his apartment, a new apartment nicer than the old one with actual furniture and working air conditioning, when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. I miss us. 3 words that might have destroyed him 6 months ago. That might have sent him spiraling into doubt and longing and all the complicated emotions that came with loving someone who didn't love you back. Jackson looked at the message for a long moment. Then he deleted it without reading the rest. He didn't feel angry. He didn't feel vindicated. He just felt tired of carrying the weight of what they'd been. Tired of wondering what might have happened if things had been different. Biscuit looked up from his bed in the corner. His tail wagged once, twice. You hungry, buddy? The tail wagged faster. Jackson got up to fill the food bowl. Some things were simpler than others. Being a boss was harder than he'd expected, not the decisions. The decisions were easy. You looked at the numbers, you weighed the options, you made the call. That was just problem solving, and Jackson had been solving problems his whole life. No, the hard part was the loneliness. He couldn't complain to the employees about being stressed. They had their own problems. He couldn't talk to Trevor about the pressure, because Trevor would just tell him to sell the whole thing and go back to fixing air conditioners. He couldn't call Jenna, obviously. And Faith was helpful, but she had her own life, her own work, her own concerns. So Jackson sat in his office at the end of long days, staring at spreadsheets he didn't quite understand, feeling the weight of 52 families depending on him to get it right. Money didn't solve loneliness. Turns out nothing did. He sold the BMW on a Saturday. Garrett's precious 7 Series, the one he'd leased but never actually owned, had been repossessed by the bank. But there was another car in the company fleet, a black Mercedes SUV that Garrett had convinced the board to buy as a client relations vehicle. Jackson put it up for sale, got $43,000 for it. He used the money to buy new equipment for the warehouse, forklifts, pallet jacks, safety gear that actually met OSHA standards. The warehouse guys had been making do with broken-down machinery for years, and nobody had cared enough to fix it. When the new equipment arrived, Jackson went down to help unload it. He didn't have to. That's not what owners do. But he wanted to see their faces when they realized someone was finally paying attention. Marcus, the warehouse supervisor he'd promoted, stopped him as he was leaving. Hey, Mr. Cole. Jackson, please. Right, Jackson. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable. I just wanted to say thanks for the forklifts, for the raise, for all of it. He paused. Garrett never came down here, not once in 3 years. He didn't even know our names. I know your names, Jackson said. I've been reading the files. Yeah, but, Marcus struggled to find the words. You came down, you helped unload, that means something. Jackson didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and walked back to his truck. He met Faith for a drink on a Friday evening. Not at a fancy bar, not at some trendy rooftop place with $17 cocktails. At a dive called the Rusty Nail off Greenville Avenue where the beer was cheap and the jukebox played nothing but Waylon Jennings. Faith was already there when he arrived, sitting in a booth near the back, nursing a whiskey. You look tired, she said. Thanks, you look also tired. Charming, she raised her glass, to exhaustion. They clinked glasses, drank. How's the company? She asked, still standing, barely. I think I'm starting to understand the spreadsheets. That's progress. Is it? Jackson set down his beer. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, some disaster I didn't see coming, some mistake that brings the whole thing down. That's normal. That's what running a business feels like. Faith leaned back. But you're doing okay, Jackson. Better than okay. The employees like you, the numbers are stabilizing. You're not Garrett. That's a low bar. It's a bar, she smiled. And you cleared it, that's something. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the jukebox, watching the other patrons come and go. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything, really. Just two people who'd been through something together, sharing a moment of quiet. What happens next? Jackson asked. For the company or for you? Both. Faith considered it. For the company, you keep showing up, you keep learning, you make it through the first year, and then it gets easier. She took a sip of whiskey. For you, I don't know, that's your call. What if I don't know what I want? Then you figure it out. That's what life is, Jackson, figuring it out as you go. She set down her glass. But whatever you decide, you've got options now. You've got resources. You've got time. That's more than most people get. Jackson nodded. He finished his beer. Same time next week, Faith smiled. Same time next week. 6 months later. The Dallas winter had arrived, not cold by northern standards, but cold enough for jackets and heaters and complaints from people who thought 50 degrees was freezing. The kind of weather that made you appreciate being inside. Jackson Cole stood on a rooftop in Garland, Texas. Not because he had to, not because his job demanded it. He hadn't done a service call in months. He had people for that now. A whole team of HVAC technicians who handled the maintenance contracts that Cold Chain Holdings had started picking up. But today was different. Today he was teaching. See this valve here? He pointed to a junction in the refrigerant line. What does it do? The kid beside him, a 19-year-old named Deshaun, fresh out of trade school, squinted at the valve. Expansion valve regulates the flow of refrigerant into the evaporator. Good, and if it fails? System loses efficiency, compressor works harder, eventually burns out. Exactly. Jackson handed him a wrench. Now show me how you'd replace it. Deshaun got to work. He was nervous. His hands shook a little and he dropped a fitting once, but he knew the steps. He'd studied. He'd practiced. He just needed experience. Jackson stepped back and watched the Dallas skyline in the distance. The towers downtown, glittering in the winter sun. The highways snaking through the city. The endless sprawl of parking lots and strip malls and apartment complexes. 6 months ago, he'd been crawling across rooftops like this one, invisible, forgettable, just another pair of hands doing the work that kept the world running. Now he owned a building, a company, a piece of land down in Karnes County that pumped money into his account every month like clockwork, and he was still on a rooftop. Still teaching someone else how to do the thing he'd spent his life learning. Some things didn't change. Some things shouldn't. He saw Jenna on a Thursday afternoon. He'd stopped at North Park Center to buy a gift for Trevor's birthday, a new fishing rod because Trevor had been complaining about his old one for months. He was walking through the mall, bag in hand, when he passed the Nordstrom counter. And there she was, standing behind the cosmetics display, wearing a black smock with her name tag pinned to the front. Her hair was different, shorter, more practical. Her makeup was minimal. She looked older than he remembered, not worse. Just different, humbler maybe, more real. She saw him at the same moment he saw her. For a long second, neither of them moved. The shoppers flowed around them, oblivious to the history that hung in the air between them. Then Jenna smiled, a small, sad smile. Jackson nodded, and he kept walking. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel satisfaction. He didn't feel much of anything at all, really. Just a vague sense of closure, like finishing a book he'd been reading for too long. She'd made her choices. He'd made his. They were different people now, living different lives, and that was okay. That was enough. The land in Karnes County was 90 minutes south of Dallas. Jackson drove down on a Saturday morning, Biscuit in the passenger seat, the radio playing low. The highway gave way to back roads, the back roads gave way to dirt tracks, and eventually he was there. 640 acres of nothing stretching out to the horizon under a pale blue sky. His grandfather's land. His land now. The house was new. Not fancy, just a two-bedroom ranch-style place with a wraparound porch and a view of the oil derricks in the distance. He'd built it with the first year's royalties using a local contractor who'd known his grandfather back in the day. He parked the truck, let Biscuit out, walked up the porch steps and sat down in the rocking chair he'd bought at an antique store in Karnes City. The derricks pumped in the distance. Slow, rhythmic, endless, money coming out of the ground. Jackson poured himself a cup of coffee from the thermos he'd brought. He took a sip. He looked out at the land his grandfather had refused to sell, the land everyone had called worthless, the land that had changed everything. He thought about the past year, about the rooftop and the skylight and the moment he'd realized his wife was gone. About the fake watch and the rented furniture and the lie that had seduced her. About the letter he'd almost thrown away. About Faith and Trevor and Bernard and all the people who'd helped him build something from nothing. About Garrett Whitmore, currently serving 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement. About Jenna, selling lipstick at a department store counter. About the 52 employees who still showed up every day, who still trusted him to get it right. He thought about what he'd wanted back when he'd first asked Faith how to buy a debt. Revenge, exposure, justice. He'd gotten all of it, every last piece. But that's not why he'd won. He'd won because he kept going. Because he didn't give up when the card was declined and the apartment was empty and the dog was the only one who needed him. Because he'd learned, a long time ago, that dignity wasn't something other people gave you. It was something you kept, no matter what they took away. Garrett had money. Garrett had status. Garrett had everything Jackson didn't have, but Garrett was a fraud. And frauds don't last. They can't. The weight of their own lies crushes them eventually. It's just physics. It's just time. Jackson had waited. Jackson had planned. Jackson had fixed the things that were broken and built the things that needed building. And in the end, that's all it took. Biscuit wandered back from wherever he'd been exploring. He climbed the porch steps, his old legs creaking, and settled at Jackson's feet with a contented sigh. "Good boy," Jackson said. The sun was setting over the Texas brush country, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. The derricks kept pumping. The wind kept blowing. The world kept turning. Jackson finished his coffee. He thought about tomorrow, about the drive back to Dallas. About the meetings and the spreadsheets and the endless small decisions that came with running a company. About the life he'd built from the wreckage of the life he'd lost. He thought about the theme that had guided him through all of it. The lesson his grandfather had taught him without ever saying the words. The loudest man in the room is usually the broke one. Garrett had been loud. Garrett had been flashy. Garrett had filled every space with his presence and his confidence and his lies. Jackson had been quiet. Jackson had been patient. Jackson had watched and waited and let the truth do its work. And now Garrett was in prison and Jackson was sitting on a porch he owned, drinking coffee while the sun went down. Some victories don't require violence. Some justice doesn't require cruelty. Sometimes you just have to outlast the lie. Jackson set down his cup. He scratched Biscuit behind the ears. He watched the last light fade from the sky. Then he closed his eyes and let himself rest.